Now that we've learned how to use HDRI images from the internet in Blender, like for example as a background or an environment texture, I would now like to show you how you can do the whole thing by yourself and how you can create your own HDRI with your cell phone. Of course, you first have to make a distinction that what we create with our cell phone is not really an HDRI. And that makes complete sense because it does not have the same brightness information as an HDR or EXR file. That is of course perfectly clear, but still, you can achieve a very good result with this workflow, and that is probably enough for most purposes. Now, enough talking, let's get going. We bring up our cell phone and we go to Google Street View, which is a free app that you can download. Now we're going to the spot where we want to take our HDRI, and we open the Google Street View app. We click on it and we click the middle button which says take an all-round panoramic shot from a fixed location. It says it here in German, but it'll say so in a different language when you open it. Now, if we click on it, it can very often happen that this orange circle in the middle moves in a certain direction almost by itself. Now, if this happens, you have to click the cross at the bottom to start again. And this has to do with the fact that your phone probably wasn't calibrated the right way. You have to hold it very, very still as you can. Okay, so the moment it does work, you basically move your phone in any direction until you see the orange dot again, and then you just walk around like that. It doesn't matter which way you do first. I mean, we need all directions anyway. And once you've made the whole circle around, you click on the green mark at the bottom, and there you go. You got your profile, and your HDRI is being downloaded as we speak. What is very important now is that you have to wait for the app to download everything properly. Otherwise, you can have some problems actually getting it done. Quite often, I had the problem that I simply turned off my cell phone while it was downloading or while it was processing, and then I ended up not having a file, which was of course very annoying. And you can imagine it was even more annoying when I was actually making videos to use as a panorama. This is something we're going to be talking about in section 7, by the way. Now, when the whole thing is downloaded, we can open it, and then we know that everything worked out, and you can see it here. There are a few small problems in the parking lot. For example, these stripes on the parking lot don't align that well. Sometimes they're not stitched together properly, but it doesn't really matter because we definitely have the position of our sun in the scene, and that's the position of the brightest point. And the whole thing we can then save as a panorama, so not as an EXR or as an HDR file, but as a JPEG. Now, as I mentioned, JPEG files do not contain the brightness information that an EXR or HDR file would contain, but that means we have to think about how we can deal with that ourselves. Now, as a quick demonstration, here we are in Blender, and we've already seen this change from object to world in the shader editor. We did that already. Now we press Shift A, environment texture, and you can see the whole thing is a bit dark, and we can't see exactly where the sun is coming from. Now, why can't we see that? The answer to that is pretty simple. Like I said, this is not an EXR or HDR file, so that means Blender basically sees every white dot as equally bright, and that means the white dot on the back of the car is exactly the same as the sun in terms of brightness, and that's not what we want. To just give you a quick demonstration that we really don't have any directional light here, I'm just putting a plane in, and then you can see we really have very little shadows and stuff like that. We have a very hard shadow cast on the car in the background though, and that is what we want. So what are we missing in this scene? We're missing a sun. Now, of course, we can go in and say, okay, we're missing a sun, so we do Shift A, light, sun, very nice, and then set the power to 10 here, just like you do, and then let's move the sun out so that we can see what we're doing, turn it around a little bit, and yeah, okay, let's take it this way. We could theoretically do all this, and that is actually what will happen right now in terms of the train of thought. However, there's an add-on called HDRI Sun Align, which does exactly the thing that we need in a way more precise manner. And the best part is that the HDRI Sun Aligner also is free, and the link to it is in the PDF for this section. Now, click on this link and then download the whole thing, but it's important that you include it as a zip file. For me personally, that means that since I'm a Mac user, if I download the whole thing with Safari, the zip will automatically be unpacked, and that is not good. That means I have to download this plugin with Google Chrome so that it remains a zip file. Now, then we download the HDRI Sun Aligner add-on and we click Command Comma again. But instead of going to the search now, we're not going to do that because that searches through the pre-installed add-ons for Blender. We click on the install at the top, and then we look for the plugin in our download folder. Now, here's the difference in a nutshell. Here it's downloaded from Safari, which means that if I open the folder, you can see that there's code, which is not usable because Blender does not understand that. But here I also downloaded the whole thing as a zip, and then it will actually work. So we click install add-on, and then we can see in the middle, modules installed, yada, 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 everything works as it should. Now we're going to do the search, and we search for the HDRI Sun Aligner. We click the tick box, and then you'll see that a few more options pop up. If you don't see the panel pop up, you can press the N button, and then it will appear at the top right corner, and there you can find everything. Now, we've set our HDRI the way we want it, and of course we can rotate it now as well. So I already showed you how to rotate an HDRI texture in the last lecture, and we can also just turn the whole thing so far that the whole thing is exactly aligned with the parking lot, so to speak. Now, I'll just quickly switch over to Eevee because then the whole thing will update faster because I don't feel like waiting around right now. Now, if we put it this way, that means we're pretty much right in the parking lot, and we just want Blender to automatically add a sun from exactly the right angle with exactly the right strength. And Blender normally does not do that, but the add-on does. That's why this add-on makes our lives very easy, because we now click on Calculate Sun Position, then we can click on the preview afterwards, and we can see that the add-on checks almost by itself where exactly the brightest point is in our HDRI, and even then shows us this. And it turns out it identified it correctly. That is indeed the brightest spot, and that is where the sun is supposed to go. That means we can preview this window again, and then we can simply click on Add New Sun. And as you will see, we have a new sun in our scene, and it's precisely aligned on the place where we want it to. The angle of incidence of the brightest point would be calculated by this app, so to speak. Now, of course, we still have our sun setting here. The angle is 0.526 degrees, and this is always the standard angle for non-diffused light. In other words, when the sun simply shines onto the surface of the Earth without any clouds in between, it usually has a diffusion angle of 0.5 degrees. Now, if I turn it down to 0, it looks like an absolutely hard shadow. If we make the angle a little bit higher, then you can see that the shadow is becoming more and more diffuse, and that would be the effect you would have on a cloudy day, for example. Now, we can also simply reset the whole thing by using reset to default. And reset to default, fun fact, is the command that is actually assigned to backspace in Blender. So you asked in the beginning, like, hey, if I delete everything with X, what does backspace do? Well, backspace is what sets all the sliders back to their default setting. This means that if I change this here and then want it back to the standard setting, I just move the mouse over this section, press backspace, and bam, I'm back where I was before with the default settings. And yeah, that's how we just loaded up our own HDRI. However, I can imagine that there's still a question like, can we do this whole thing from Blender itself, even if I didn't make a cell phone texture myself, for example? Can I use digital lighting, and can I maybe render my own HDRI out of Blender? And the answer to that question is, of course, yes, you can do absolutely anything with Blender. And that's what the next lecture will be about. I'm looking forward to it, I hope you do too, and we'll see you when it comes down to it. I'm going to show you how to render your own HDRIs right out of the box in Blender. See you then.